expiration date, otherwise it's going to spiral out of control if it hasn't already. This family's got 5 kids, this family's got 6 kids, etc., and it's spiraling out of control without an official expiration date. We have to stop it and nip it now. The next thing is I drove commercial truck all of my life. So some of this is about driving and the driving of rules on highways, both federal and statewide.
Okay.
I'm very much in support of the border wall. We need that. The immigrations are running over our country and they are making us a third world country. They're trying to introduce laws of their country which will make our country a third grade nation compared to what it was, which means they are not studying our Constitution. You have immigrants coming across the border, and the first thing they holler is, we're going to sue the government for unconstitutional rights. And I've been in this country over 80 years, and they claim they have more rights than I have been for 80 years. So we have to get a firm, legal, federal law for immigration policy. If they're good people, fine, bring them in. But if they are bad people, we don't need them. According to OAN,
those are, both the first two are both federal issues that we have no control over.
but you do have a voice in the federal government the same as I.
Well, correct, but yeah.
Yeah, we can talk to the members of Congress. Yeah, absolutely.
So you do have a voice just a little bit bigger than mine.
I got Jim Sensenbrenner's cell phone number, if that's what you're
You do?
Wow. Right.
Now, in this state here, our new governor made several comments that I'm against. I'm being a professional driver.
Right.
He wants to make it a right to drive, not a privilege, but a right to drive. This I am against, because if it's a privilege to drive, you are protecting your privilege of driving in the state, not just because. I've met people, as a professional driver, I've met people that couldn't read a road map, and they're driving an 80,000-pound rig compared to your 2,000 to 3,000 pound car. What chance has your 2,000 to 3,000 pound car got against an 80,000 pound rig? Now, most people don't know that all between them and instant death on these 80,000 pound rigs is a piece of iron as big as them 2 thumbs, and that's all it is. That's known as the kingpin that goes up between the tractor and the 5th wheel on the trailer. 80,000 pounds on the hunk of iron that big around is these 2 thumbs. And they're giving driver's license to people who can't read a road map.
Well, the controversial piece of what Governor Evers is trying to do right now is issue driver's licenses to illegals. That's what we're getting a lot of contacts on. I think you guys are probably getting the same thing. A lot of Wisconsin residents are pretty upset with that whole concept. So if there's anything that's, been part of his budget and that he's been out there talking about, both on the campaign trail and since he's been sworn in as governor, I mean, that's the most controversial thing that's been out there.
Well, he has another controversial thing. He wants to pardon 1,500 prisoners and give them the right to vote, which is a mockery of our state law.
I don't know about voting.
I haven't heard the voting thing, but
That's Bernie Sanders for sure.
Yeah.
But I don't know about Governor Evers. I haven't heard him say that. But he does have a non-violent offender program in which he would, in some fashion, release some of the inmates that are currently incarcerated here in the state. So that is part of his budget and has been part of his platform. So.
and he's been talking about bringing back the parole board.
Yeah, and the parole board, which Governor Walker never really recognized, so.
And another thing I would like to discuss, it's probably a federal level, as I look around the room here, most of us are senior citizens in this room, and most of us have got to go to the drugstore for our sugar pills, as they're called. But if you go to 5 different drugstores and order the same prescription, not one of the drugstores has got a pill the same color, same size, or anything like this. Now, most of us are not chemists. In fact, I doubt if 3 people in this room are chemists and know what that bottle of prescription is like. I would like to see them standardize the local sugar pills so that everybody can count out 1 sugar pill for this, 1 sugar pill for that, 1 sugar pill for the other by size, color, and shape.
Okay.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you very
welcome.
much. That's a lot of stuff. Very good. Okay, Marty Stanton from Reeseville. Marty.
We had a very lucky young man in Wisconsin this week, which means a lot of taxes are gonna come back in. What's gonna happen with those taxes that he paid on his lottery?
We don't know yet. It's like $35 million,
Yeah.
I think. That's supposed to come back into, through income tax collections, and I'm not sure, it's like any other revenue that would be generated. It'll be part of the full general purpose revenue pot of money and will be allocated out as appropriate. Could be used for anything under the sun, really.
probably the same thing that happens to your income taxes, because that's really what it is. I mean, it comes
Yeah.
into the general fund as an income tax, and it builds the state budget. And
But it's certainly good news.
I'm glad he lives in Wisconsin.
right, yeah, it's a little bit extra than, I mean, it's
Yeah.
So
kind
it
of jangler
can't be
money.
earmarked or it can't be put towards, let's say, transportation budget or something, knowing that something that big is coming in.
Sure, I mean, yeah, the legislature has obviously the ability and the power to appropriate, and it will be in that pot of money that will be subject to that discussion and debate by the legislature on where that money should be moved, right? Yep.
I do want to thank you guys for what you're doing, stand up against some of the things that are being said and done. The other question is what has been done in the state of Wisconsin about illegal voting?
A lot of stuff.
Yeah, a lot of
over the
things in the
last
last
8
few
years,
years,
yeah. Yeah,
Voter ID was
Voter
the
ID
biggest
was the
one, and
biggest
that's still
one,
being litigated to some extent, but it's in place at least, but there's still arguing
There's
in
still,
courts about that.
there's multiple lawsuits that keep on stemming up on voter ID, but that was the biggest piece of that.
How are we utilizing, I mean, a lot of people have a lot of IDs
right.
and can get access to the IDs. Is there anything else that we can do to make sure that these illegal citizens are not, and the reason I'm asking is I have seen, not in the town of Lowell, not here, but in several communities, especially in Dane County, I have seen numerous illegal immigrants voting.
Well, you know, you look at the city of Milwaukee, or I believe it was the county, wanted to establish a county ID that they would use for anything from their garbage dump on big, you know, from things like that, for county or city purposes. We made sure that those IDs, you can go ahead and do that all you want, spend the money to have your ID, but we made sure that those IDs were not eligible for voting. It's pretty strict on what types of identification you can use.
Thank you very much for coming. Thank you. Leroy and Janice, Creer?
Correct.
Crier, Beaver Dam.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
I got two
Yeah.
things.
Yes, sir.
About the toll roads and the gas tax you guys are talking about. What about the toll roads?
So federal government has a lot to say when it comes to tolling in the states. And the last session, there was a discussion that kind of emerged under the Walker administration, and both houses of the legislature also kind of, for the first time, I think, kind of waded into that and really had some serious discussions about it. at that point, there were 3 federal slots that were available to states. And they could come up with a plan and create a study, do a study on how this could be implemented or used in the state. And then it was, you could apply. And what the legislature decided to do in the budget was to follow through with that second phase of a study. We thought that there was enough there that we should at least explore this. So we added it to the budget. It was part of the state budget when it came out of the legislature last time. And in some back and forth discussions, there were some pieces of it that Governor Walker did not feel comfortable with, so he vetoed that language. He vetoed it out of the state budget. So that kind of put us back to square one. Since then, we have kind of brought that discussion back. I've been talking to my Republican colleagues in the state Senate about tolling, and I know that the speaker has been talking to his members as well. The dynamic of these 3 slots has changed at the federal level. With President Trump, and even though they haven't moved forward with an infrastructure bill yet in Congress, and I don't know if they'll ever get there, quite honestly, with the split between the House and the Senate now. But they've been talking about, making it more readily available to states, and that you would be able to toll on existing roadways. So it would not have to be directly linked to, okay, we're gonna build a new highway, and when we build this new highway, that tolling equipment is gonna be put in place. So it's a viable discussion, it continues, and probably will continue right up till the end, so. That's tolling, I guess.
What about the gas tax? Are you guys in favor of that, or what?
So the governor presented 8-cent gas tax increase. He also is trying to bring back indexing, which would increase the gas tax without a vote of the legislature. It would just automatically continue to go up. I would say right now, we're in the early stages of that discussion, and I don't have a full resolution of what we can get the votes for. I really don't know. As majority leader now for the last 12 years, yeah, I've learned one thing, and it is you don't get out over your skis when it comes to the caucus. So there's a discussion that is continuing now. I think there is agreement that there should be more revenue in transportation. It's just, how do you do that and how do you get there? If you look, I'll let these guys speak, I'm talking too much. In southeastern Wisconsin, though, we still have this major issue, and that is that there's $5 billion in mega projects, okay? And the ones you're familiar with is, we completed and did the Marquette interchange, and now the Zoo interchange. If you've been down there over the last 3 years, you've seen that the first 2 phases of that have been completed. There's still the north spur that needs to be completed under the Zoo. But, these are all billion-dollar projects, billions, okay? And you could do a 10-cent gas tax increase tomorrow, and it's not going to be sufficient enough. So I think most of us know there's a looming huge issue for us, because most of these interstate projects were built in the 50s. And there's not going to be the federal money, I think, to come rushing in and be able to fill that pot. And at the same time, those that represent southeastern Wisconsin, we find ourselves competing with projects that are outstate, So it's complex, and we're trying to make some strides in the right direction. But I think there's some other things that I think the legislature will consider. You still got discussions going on about registration, titling fees, and heavy truck. So there's a lot of different pots that have to be filled, and the legislature has to figure this out before the end of June. So.
Because I know a lot of truck drivers go down to Chicago, and they pay plenty for their trucks going through that toll. So
Yeah, and I think that, the Illinois-Wisconsin state line would obviously be a place that you would have to consider.
And we got a lot of Illinois people coming up here in Wisconsin, so, because when we go down there, we have to pay the toll, so
Right.
why can't they pay the toll when they come up here?
Right. No, I understand that.
Yeah, I think Mark has had a much more in-depth discussion on where Assembly leadership is concerning transportation and the budget. As a lowly rank and file member, not on finance, though, I would not support a gas tax increase that level, so.
I think that in early May, the Assembly Caucus will have a discussion on new revenue. I'm hopeful that there will be new revenue in the transportation system. I think with some of the concerns you just heard, it might not be gas tax, but we're gonna talk about gas tax as well as other opportunities. Tolling is something that would probably be a little bit longer term, but I certainly think we'll continue to talk about that and other long-term solutions too. But I think much like the Senate's discussing what it might look like, if it's not the gas tax, what could be other options? We'll have those discussions in the first couple weeks of May also. And I'm still hopeful that the two caucuses will be able to find some new revenue for supporting our roads.
If I may ask a question, is that okay?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
What are our other options for, besides tolling and gas tax? Is there?
Oh lordy, we're
Yeah,
already
there's-
10 minutes over, but I mean, we have probably
It's like.
8 or 10 other simple revenue streams we could look at. Long-term solutions besides tolling are primarily mileage fee-based type stuff. But if you're talking just a short-term or just I mean, you could do registration fees, title fees, different uses of general fund, like sales taxes on car parts. You could,
Okay.
tons of different,
And the reason why, I mean,
you could explore.
every budget survey that I send out, you know, the last couple I've had, knowing that none of these are desirable, what is the least undesirable
Yeah.
for getting transportation funds? And you know, this gas tax, tolling, and the number one response of the 8 options was a line through all of them saying none of them. So that's not very helpful. So, but that was the most response, the most popular response I got was a line through all of them. So.
Very good. We can move on. Marilyn, Rachel, B-Ram?
Yes,
Marilyn.
I actually have 2 issues. One is that the CBD growth is crazy right now. There's at least 4 shops in Little Beaver Dam.
Including the
And-
video store.
Exactly. And yeah, 3 of them are in our downtown that we're trying to revitalize, and that's kind of not the type of revitalization that I think helps to grow a community. So a suggestion that I would have, I've gone into one of the stores to kind of see how it's marketed, and it's very gray area in terms of them believing that they can convince their customers that they are medically knowledgeable about this product, and it's really a supplement that has almost none regulation, but their markup is huge, and that's why everybody's getting into it. So if you could tax it enough to provide funding to the university to do some of the research that should be done, I think it would benefit the entire country as more and more places are opting to allow its sale there. So
It is the wild west when it comes to this stuff right now.
it
and
is,
regulation will
exactly.
catch up with it. I had a colleague who yesterday had a CBD infused brat in Milwaukee.
if you go into one of the shops in Beaver Dam, you can buy a small bag of cookies for $20. You can buy candies, gummies. You can buy syringes with oil in there for $70.
Sure, it's
And
all.
it's
yeah.
totally ridiculous. And they're in talking with DATCAP and everything, just like a lot of industries that are out there, as people are retiring, we don't have enough employees to cover all of our needs for regulating. And I can tell you for sure that one of the shops downtown, that there's signage there and the way that it's worded is illegal to bring the medical claims
Sure.
in there, that it's not being done, and there's not enough people to do it.
And what I tell my son, I have a son who's a freshman in Whitewater, and his buddies were asking me about this, and I said, well, the easy way for you to think about it is right now, where can't you get them? CBD products. You can't get them at Walmart, can't get them at Walgreens. Why? Because it hasn't been tested, you don't know what you're putting in your body at this
Yeah.
point. So I'm not saying they're bad, I'm just saying I agree with you, the regulation will catch
Yeah.
up with it at some point.
Yeah, so that might be a revenue stream that you could incorporate into that to help build the building blocks instead of just fighting against it to begin with, find a way to the future with it. And then the other thing that I had was related to our dairy industry. For the majority of my career, I worked in the cheese industry and was very familiar with a lot of movement of milk solids from other countries and how that impacts our, whether or not the dairy farmers that we have a home for their milk. And what I've seen happen is that there's a number of cheese plants in Wisconsin that are now owned by a Canadian company. And with the Mexico and Canada trade agreements, I'm wondering if we have legislation that protects us from them being able to bring in whatever milk solids they want over the border that then supplants our own milk resources. And you may not have the answer, but I'm just asking if you could investigate that and make sure that we're being fair to our dairy farmers.
Yeah, I guess it's a little premature to see how the renegotiated NAFTA agreement is going to work, but it can't get any worse than it was before.
Well, but I wonder if they are able to work outside of that by being a Canadian company that owns plants in the United States.
Yeah, and I know there's Canadian corporations that operate in the Midwest when it comes to the dairy industry. There's a couple of things that I think the legislature has been focused on that we're hopeful we can come up with some type of deal to create new markets. And probably the one that's at the forefront right now is there's corporation Foremost Foods that is trying to develop a new plant in Wisconsin that would deal, the whey product is really taken off kind of globally, and Foremost Foods is trying to develop a plant to deal with that, and we're hopeful that that would result in a lot more pounds of milk being purchased within the state that really help the dairy industry. So WEDC is working with them right now to try and come up with maybe an incentive package or a way of working through that. And I don't know, the legislature will probably visit it at some point and decide if we actually want to kind of put a mix of tax credit and general purpose revenue or what we might do. But there are some things like that that would be more isolated to the state because we're always fighting this global front, and it's very difficult. And when we had, almost 100 farms that, had contracts canceled about a year and a half ago, I mean, I think it was a red flag for a lot of us that, that industry right now is very vulnerable, and that would be a huge blow to the state. So it's something I think that's at the foremost of a lot of our minds, that's for sure. So,
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Gary Beal, Gary.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about the Wisconsin 90 statute fence law. It's a old 1800s law that is vaguely written, and some people are taking advantage of it. And I guess what I'd like to see is all townships recognize that they can amend the law. They can't change the law, but they can amend the law to suit their needs so people can't take advantage of it. May 13th, 2016, I got a hold of Marie Jolly, and she emailed me back, and she gave me
Is that in my office?
yes.
Yeah, I think Marie worked for me at the time, yeah.
Yeah.
She works for Senator Fine now.
Yeah. So this is the email.
Okay.
Yeah. So the law can be amended, and what I'd like to see, I know the town of Lowell has a grip on it, and that's going to be amended real soon.
Yeah, probably at our next town meeting.
Yeah. So what I'd like to see
So what are you guys gonna do? What's the town gonna do?
Well, one of the things where it stands right now is that if the town is petitioned or requested to do a fencing, we just absolutely have to go out there the way the state statute
Yeah.
reads right now. And what our intent or what our thought is that we've been advised, we've had it looked at, and we've been advised